Now, if you're into NFTs, you're probably using websites like PoolPM, CNFT Jungle, or CNFT Tools to view and share and look at rarities and all sorts of different things. Now, this new one that came up across my desk is called CNFT.me or CNFT Explorer. And I have Allan Hart joining me on this episode to talk about it, how he's built it up, and how he's done some of these really cool features, such as this NFT timeline, a historic timeline that goes through all the different NFTs that have ever been minted on the Cardano blockchain. And it's fast and it's snappy, and I really like how it's done. So, and he shares a couple of ideas and insights of all of that as well. And he also talks about how he possibly will try and leverage the platform and monetize it one day. At the moment, he isn't, but there are a couple of ideas that are coming across his desk so that he can improve this platform, and hopefully we'll see it one day as one of the staple tools in the Cardano ecosystem. I kind of like this one. All right, let's get into the interview.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast.
Allan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pete. Nice to be here.
So before we get into the project, let's find out a little bit about yourself, how you got into crypto and how you discovered Cardano. So that little journey into the crypto space.
Sure. Happy to explain. So I got into cryptocurrency, I guess, around the peak of in December 2017, when Bitcoin took its major run up to 19,000 US. It was then that I couldn't ignore it anymore. I'm a software developer, always have been, and so I've been aware of I had been aware of Bitcoin for quite a long time, but just never paid any mind to it. But after that happened, that at least caught my attention. And then, I drank a bunch of Kool-Aid and just, started to learn more about the actual technology, like what does blockchain technology represent, and sort of its relationship to cryptocurrency, et cetera. And actually at the time I was sort of in a transitional period career-wise, and decided that I wanted to take some amount of money that I'd received in a severance and invest it into cryptocurrency with the notion that, maybe, I don't know, I sort of was treating it sort of like a long-term lottery ticket type thing. Let me just sort of place a bet on cryptocurrency. So, but I didn't choose any particular one. I kind of studied the gamut, and actually Cardano was one of the ones that came to my attention, mostly thanks to its placement on the coin market cap. So, I sort of limited my attention to the mainstream or the major players. So, anyway, that's my interest in cryptocurrency dates back a ways, but my interest in Cardano is more recent. And it actually started just after the launch of SpaceBuds, when I was approached by my cousin, actually, who he had learned about Alessandro's project SpaceBuds, and I think he'd been following the NFT activity on Ethereum for. He's a collector by nature. He collects all kinds of sort of cool stuff. So when NFTs came to Cardano, he came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing a project?" He knew that I had a background in software, and of course, you need somebody like that to, certainly in the earliest days before there was any marketplaces or services to help with the minting, et cetera. It took a fair bit of technical know-how, still does, I guess, to actually mint things on the blockchain. So that was to be my role. And the timing was good. I decided, sure, let's go. Let's launch a line of NFTs ourselves. So he formed a team of myself and a couple of artists and a couple of, we'll call them like promoters or media managers, sort of thing. And we tossed around some ideas and some artwork and so on. And there was something percolating for sure. In the end, it didn't really it didn't reach fruition, and we didn't launch our own line of NFTs. But I in the process learned a lot about Cardano and really started to appreciate the project internally. Like I learned how to work with the chain itself, how to transact, how to mint tokens, etc. And that was an interesting challenge, and it was a good one. I still haven't really managed to do much with all that tooling that I built up to actually mint on the chain. But anyway, and I may or may not ever use that stuff. But what I also learned about was just how all the data was structured, and that's when I learned about some of the other tools that the Cardano Foundation, if that's correct, has put out. Namely, there's a tool called Cardano DB Sync, which is useful for taking this long string of events, which is the blockchain, right? Everything that has happened since Cardano launched to present time. And it organizes all of that stuff into a database that an application programmer like myself can handily work with, right? So it's something you can query. For example, give me all of the transaction history for the asset with this ID type of thing. That's not something that you can directly ask the blockchain for. It's not how it works, right? The blockchain is purely a sequential sequence of events. That is all it is. And so if you want to do more sophisticated things with it, you have to have this sort of intermediary, which is what the Cardano DB Sync is. And so as an application programmer and I'm a full stack developer, I do everything from the sysadmin all the way to the interface programming and everything in between. So learning how to interact with the Cardano DB Sync and do cool things such as build the Explorer that we're going to look at in depth here. This is just the kind of thing I do for fun, to be honest with you. I wasn't really motivated to do it for any other reason except, and I really want to sort of, when I was dabbling with actual NFT minting, one of my immediate frustrations was with the fact that it was very unclear as to how I structured my metadata and how it would appear, if at all, on pool.pm, which was the only viewer of its kind at the time. I'm talking April of last year. There was nowhere else that I knew of to actually see the NFT. You could go to Cardano Scan and see all the data, but you couldn't actually see the NFT. And that was because, pool.pm was sort of opinionated, I guess, about, what it would show, depending on how your metadata was structured. So, and still is, in fact, and so is mine, and so is every other one. And this is a problem that I think some people are fairly aware of in the space, is that there's the lack of standardization around the metadata. And this is a continuing problem. But anyway, as a developer, I immediately, it got under my skin a little bit, the fact that, I was just having to conform, I suppose, to whatever conventions they decided that they were going to implement. Now, looking at it from the other direction, like I've built my own Explorer now and had to face the same challenges that they did with how do I, working with a metadata structure that is completely unstandardized. At best, we have the proposal that Alessandro put out early on, suggesting following basically the same scheme or format that Ethereum proposed long before the 721 for lack of a bit. Anyway, and most people fortunately have adhered to that. But anyway, the point is it's quite a challenge to deal with this sort of arbitrarily structured metadata. The other thing that frustrated me was I just felt like the viewing experience on pool.pm was sort of lacking. Like it just, the size of the image was kind of like, by the way, in the past year, they've done a lot to improve, but I'm still talking about what motivated me to do anything at all about the problem. And part of it was just feeling like there was so much room for improvement in the user experience. And that's where I thought I saw an opportunity to put some of my skills to work. And so, that's what we're going to look at here shortly.
So it sounds like you went ahead and built a CNFT Explorer because you were annoyed with everything else that's out there. That's what it comes down to.
Pretty much. But isn't that how all problems are solved? Or how
exactly.
things happen is somebody sees something and it just, it triggers them in just the right way and then they act. And something like that.
I can do this better. So exactly.
But it wasn't purely that. It was also for the test. Like the technical challenge of how do I solve this problem? I love to solve interesting problems.
And of course, you're doing this all in your spare time for fun. Okay.
Pretty much, yes. Thus far, anyway, this has purely been for sport. Mm-hmm.
So you've put together this website called CNFT.me, and you sent me the link to have a look at, and I thought, all right, I'll check it out and have a look. Had a little play with it, and some of the user experience through it is quite nice. And I love one of the things that you integrated in, and that's the CNFT timeline. Being able to scroll through history and see all the various NFTs that had been minted on the blockchain. So I just scrolled through it, had a quick look, and went all the way back into time for the very first NFTs. And I saw Alessandra's berry NFTs on there. Yeah. And that was so fast. Like the experience of just scrolling into any point in time and then just seeing the NFTs like almost instantaneously appear was, what caught my attention. It's like, how the hell did you make that so fast? Like compared to other ones that you look at, you have to wait for it to load. You can see it syncing and loading. So that caught my attention. I really wanted to dig into how you actually built this and how you made it such a nice user experience in terms of speed. So first off, obviously you have that software engineering background. What is the setup of this site? Like from a technical point of view, how did you go about building it? What are you using DB Sync in the back end? Did you build your own integration layer? For example, the Pool PM, I believe they have their own as well, but they use some APIs as well to view some things. Give me the whole breakdown.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. And actually, I'll start by talking about the timeline because that was the first feature that I built, actually. And that, I guess, the reason I decided to start there is that it was the obvious or the simplest sort of entry point to the project. Because I was trying to mimic what Pool.pm was doing on their homepage, which was showing a timeline, but theirs only goes back about 30 minutes or something or an hour. Yeah. It doesn't go back far enough, in my opinion, to allow people to really track the activity on the chain. So I decided that I thought, well, why not go all the way? Like, why do I have to only see an hour? I should be able to see all of it. And one of the things that's really important to note, and what I guess the secret sauce behind the whole thing, is the property of the blockchain, which is that it is immutable and it's sequential. So the first token ever minted on the chain will always be the first, and the 10th will always be the 10th, and so on. The ordering is fixed, and that's something that in software that's powerful. If you can rely on the ordering of things, you can suddenly make all kinds of other assumptions about how you structure your data. So for performance reasons, whenever you're dealing with a data set of this size and the timeline, let me just point out briefly that there's a reason why my count differs from the count that you see, for instance, when you land on Pool.pm's page. It's greater, and that's because it is actually showing every asset ever minted. It ignores all of the burn events, for lack of a better term, transactions. But any token that has been reminted, and certainly projects have taken advantage of their ability to do that to, for example, evolve their tokens. So the reason the timeline has more than the number of tokens that there are is because it's showing every rendition or sort of iteration of every token. So performance, the way it works, the way it's able to be so performant no matter where you're going in the timeline is I've taken that sequence of mint events, every token ever minted. And yes, this is using my own running instance of Cardano DB. I have a server that runs that 24 hours a day, just like it's a node, right? It's a relay node with some bells and whistles, namely a Postgres database that I can query. And yes, so with some scripting magic, basically I wrote a script that would traverse that history, that table of token mint operations, and neatly insert them into pages of size 500. That just seemed like a sensible number. So page 1 of my data set that supports the timeline contains all tokens minted from 1 to 500. Page 2 is 501 to 1,000, and so on, all the way up to whatever we are at now, 4.2 million. So,
which is crazy.
So there's a lot of pages, but as far as the computer is concerned, it doesn't matter. If I ask for page 1 or page 12 or page 1012, the time it takes to retrieve the records on that page is constant. And because it's a relatively small page, that's what allows it to load quite quickly. So yes, it's taking advantage of that fact that the order is fixed, and so I can just form these pages one time, and they will be the same page for the rest of time. So they're cached eternally. So that's really powerful. It doesn't have to recompute that page over and over and over. Page one will always be page one, and so on. The only page that does change is the latest page, the one that is incomplete. So if we talk about present time, because it's just continually piling on and creating these chunks of 500. But the last chunk has maybe somewhere between 0 and 500, right? Because it's just kind of accumulating. So that one actually loads more quickly. I cache that one. I do a lot of caching, by the way. That's why it's pretty swift. But the current page is cached for only 60 seconds, whereas pages prior to that one are cached for like a year or something like that. So, yeah.
Got it. Lots of really good database optimization to make that happen.
Yeah,
structuring
actually,
and optimization.
Definitely, it starts with your data structure, and that's something, by the way, that I recently revised, and I hope that anyone watching hasn't suffered too much as a result. With all of the experience I gained from sort of the first version of my app, I realized there were some things I could do better with respect to how my data is organized. So I very recently did a server upgrade. Everything's been put onto higher powered hardware. And at the same time, did some remodeling of the data to make it even more efficient.
Okay, that's really cool. Now, I also like the fact that you can explore this in multiple different ways. So it's almost like other sites like a CNFT Jungle, where you can view a particular policy ID, a project name, or even address of a wallet. So that's similar to what PoolPM does. So I love how you can explore it and look at the blockchain from different angles. And I love those type of features. Did I cover everything there, or are there some more hidden things that I haven't found yet?
There is one feature that's relatively new. It's related to what we're talking about, but as I mentioned, the software tracks every iteration of an asset. An NFT. Projects that leverage that notion, one of them is called Fun Plastic, or Benjamin's group originally, now known as Fun Plastic. They've done a really cool thing where their tokens are evolving. First they were eggs, and then they were cracked eggs, and most recently these eggs have began to hatch into these cool little fun plastic toys, dragons. I don't know what to call them.
Weird looking creatures, yeah.
But something that community has appreciated is the fact that if you click into any particular one of those assets, you can view its complete mint history, so they can see it throughout its evolution. And that's something, to my knowledge, that only my application is offering, is the ability to see the complete mint history of an asset. That's pretty cool.
I'm just looking at it here, and I'm looking at one of the Benjamin Group's NFTs, and I can see right at the bottom of the screen the date of when the mint has changed. And I'm clicking back through that, and I can see the NFT actually changes the image, the PFP for it. That's really cool. I didn't know projects were doing this and reminting and organizing the metadata differently to evolve an NFT. That's amazing. I didn't realize that you could even do that. Change someone's NFT. That's crazy. I love being able to actually see that history, because that way you can go back in time essentially and have a look at what your NFT was before its final evolutionary phase. And it'd be very interesting to see more projects take this approach or do something like this. So that is an absolutely brilliant feature, and I'm going to play around with that a little bit more. And if I find other projects, I'll probably highlight it as well and showcase what people are doing. Absolutely,
well, I'll
amazing.
Actually take the opportunity to note something that you and I have in common, which is the ADA Waifus project.
Yep.
That's how I learned about you in the first place. I saw you in the Discord there. And I believe you are you're involved in that project. You're a representative anyway of the ADA Waifus.
Yeah.
So I've been behind the scenes, been working with their team, Sven in particular. He's been very helpful, by the way, giving me really excellent feedback along the way. There have been a few people I've met in the community. So Sven from ADAOZ Waifus has been extremely helpful as like giving me just solid feedback on his experience with the app. And I was fortunately able to identify an issue to him about his project, which was that their collection of waifus, there were 1,000 at the time. There are some specials, some rainbows and some zombies and a couple of uniques, one of which you own, I believe. The metadata structure was inconsistent between their specials, like the rainbows and all the more regular NFTs. And this came to my attention when I was trying to implement filtration for waifus. And so I identified the issue to Sven, who brought it to his developer. And they fortunately also kept their policy open, not indefinitely. I think they allowed themselves about an extra 3 months or something like that, which allowed them to correct that problem. So even if people aren't thinking about doing an evolutionary type thing the way the Fun Plastic has, there's still value in keeping that policy open, at least for a little while, to correct for mistakes made along the way. And that's just what they did. If you look at the ADAOZ Waifus, many of them anyway, you'll see that there is a second mint event in which they did correct and unify, or they corrected or normalized the structure of their data across all of their NFTs.
Yep. This all rings a bell now because I'm working as marketing for the project. So if you didn't know, and we were going through the data and we saw it was probably brought up by you, and now it actually reminds me we were looking at this site and trying to sort out the data, and we went, actually there's duplicates of a couple of the attributes because we didn't take into account plurals. For I can't remember what it was exactly. So like a
accessory and accessories.
Yeah, I think that was it. And fortunately, we could remint those. Like I didn't even realize it was possible, but they reminted everything, reorganized all the metadata, and added in the extra waifu for the MinSwap team. And corrected everything. I was like, wow, that just sorted out all of our issues. I had no idea that was possible. And everything's appearing correctly on all the various websites, including yours. So thank you for pointing that out. It was really helpful.
Well, it was the least I could do for all the valuable feedback that Sven had offered me.
Yeah. And how good is
I will point out, though, or reiterate that the only reason it was possible is because their policy was still open. SpaceBuds, for example, the policy closed a long time ago, but they have since wanted to evolve their metadata to be a little bit more rich. For example, to identify a SpaceBud that has a flaming sword versus a regular sword. They don't have that same luxury. Because their policy is closed, they can't simply remint and update their metadata. Once the policy end date has reached, then that is truly fixed for eternity.
Okay. Really good to know.
Creators, keep that in mind, and just be careful with your data, please. if I may say so.
It is hard because the ADAOZ Waifus one in particular, it's still open because we're still got another 9,000 or so to mint because it's part of a 10K drop, and the rest of them are still being designed. But with that metadata, if anyone's planning like such a large mint, you really have to think about the description of every single part, every single asset that is being put into the collection. And one little typo here, or one rarity that's off, or one accessory set that's done incorrectly because you have a different type of collection within a collection, sub collections, really puts it off. So it isn't an easy job.
Surely it isn't. And one that, I can't overemphasize this, the importance of trying to do things as an automated or streamlined a way as possible. Like the notion of trying to do this manually via spreadsheets or something, I think that's a recipe for disaster. People need to use a more programmatic approach to the management of that data. in order to avoid those typos and such.
Very much so. All right, so back to the website in general, CNFT Me. You said you've upgraded things here. You're running your own relay node with your own custom DB sync. What kind of infrastructure setup have you got there? How much is this costing you a month in terms of servers to have this site up and running?
Well, I have the application split up over 3 servers. One of them is dedicated to running the node. And that's the big boy, because it's computationally expensive. That processing blockchain data in real time it takes a lot of hardware, takes a lot of computing power. So the minimum recommended specs to run a Cardano DB sync instance, most importantly, is the memory. You want to have 32 gigs of RAM at minimum. And yes, if you want to lease computing power in the cloud of that magnitude, the costs are significant. Fortunately, I found a host called iDrive Compute. iDrive is a company that's been around for a while, but they got into the cloud hosting game more recently, and so they are offering their plans right now at a 90% discount. So that was huge. Because the cost of the instance that I'm using to run the Cardano DB sync annually is $1,920. Yeah. But I was able to get it for my first year anyway for $192, which made it affordable enough. This is something, as I mentioned earlier, it's so far not generating any revenue. So the costs are being handled by myself. And $1,900 was probably more than I was willing to spend on a hobby, but 192 I could swing. Yeah. So anyway, 1 year from today, when it's time to renew that lease, I'll just have to see how I'm feeling. I might wish to host, do something where I host it myself, build my own machine, for example, instead of hosting in the cloud. But I don't want to be a sysadmin, to be honest. Sysadmin is something I'm trying to do the absolute least of. The database server is also dedicated, and that's what the major upgrade was. Well, both actually. Previously, I was running the DB sync on a machine that had only 16 gigs of RAM, and it was choking really hard at the end of every epoch, which is like every 5 days or something like that, where it would stall for like 8 hours while it tried to make it over that boundary. And I guess that's just because it didn't have enough computing resources to do whatever it does at the end of every epoch, which is compute rewards, etc. I don't know all of the specifics of what happens between at the start and end of an epoch. But anyway, a lot of computing happens, and 16 gigs just doesn't cut it. I've noticed since upgrading the 32 gig, it hardly skips a beat. So now, thankfully, my application won't be, stalled for 8 hours every 5 days, which is the way it's been. So I was very much motivated to solve that problem. And then I already had this paid for. I had a 16 gig server that was previously running the Cardano DB sync. And so that became the obvious place to put my database, because if you want high performance in a database, the more memory you can supply, the better. You're just going to get much more efficient, faster queries. So I migrated all of the data off of this other machine that I had onto the one that has 8 cores and 16 gigs of RAM. And that has definitely contributed to the site's performance. I'm finding that it's like it can handle more requests at a time, and the more complex queries, such as when you're doing filtration and searching on metadata, etc., it's pretty snappy now. So that's thanks to that move. And then the final machine is running the API, my API that my application uses to access all that data, and it's running the front end itself, which is a React application. And that computer doesn't need much power. It's running on a 2-core, 4 gigabyte, at least not while I have basically no traffic, which is the case today. I'm hoping that through this interview, the project gets some exposure and I start to see those numbers go up. But for the moment anyway, it's very lightly used. And so you don't need much computing power to serve the 100 or so visitors a day that I'm getting. So I hope that changes, and I have reason to beef up that machine.
Okay. All right, cool. And then, of course, you can also split the API to another server as well, and then have the front end on another server. So you've got a couple more splitting options there too. I was about to ask you how much traffic you were getting a day. So just roughly 100 or so?
On a good day. Honestly,
Yeah.
the day that I saw the most traffic to the site was when ADA Handle retweeted a post of mine. I had implemented support for the ADA handle so that you can search up your wallet if you have an ADA handle. And anyway, it was just good timing, I guess. After I implemented support, I posted a tweet about it, that's where I've been putting any and all updates, like notifications about progress on the app or on my on the CNFT Twitter page, which there's a link on the homepage to that. And so I tweeted and included the ADA handle Twitter tag in there, and they picked it up. I'm sure they were watching Twitter closely. This was during their main launch.
Yeah.
Because they had done their sort of beta round, I guess, around the fall of last year, but most recently. And they're still minting like crazy. They're upwards of 100,000 now. So anyway, somebody was watching their Twitter because 15 minutes later, they retweeted this. And they have a substantial following, and their followers decided to take a look. And so, there was definitely a nice spike in traffic that day. But on the average day, like, honestly, I'm getting about 20 to 30 people a day showing up at the site.
Okay.
And I don't know what to attribute that to exactly, because obviously more than 20 or 30 people are aware of the site. But I think that it takes a lot to earn people's trust and sort of get them to prefer one product over another product that they're accustomed to using, namely pool.pm. That's been the de facto viewer for NFTs since day one. It's reliable, it's performant, people trust it. And I think that's the most relevant part of that. Yeah. So how it is that I can earn people's trust? Well, part of it is not having my site lag every 5 days for 8 hours. So I'm hoping that as I continue to make these improvements, I hope that I can start to gain exposure and more importantly, gain the community's trust as a place to go to view your NFTs or anyone else's.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things that Pool PM is good for, and then I'll compare your site to other projects as well in the CNFT space. So first off, Pool PM is great for stake pool operators because we can see when blocks are coming through and where delegation is moving in and out. So I think that was the core purpose of Pool PM in the early days, and then they added in the NFT support. Now, if the NFT viewer on Pool PM is fairly basic, you can send out a link, you can share your, the viewer of your NFT that you want to share out, and it's okay. It does its job. Yours is a little bit nicer in that respect, so you can see more information about it. It's laid out in a better way, so I think it has an upper hand in that respect. But then when you compare it to something like a CNFT Jungle or Open CNFT, the things and features that they have there is mainly around what collectors need when they're looking at NFT projects, and that is the price. So what is CNFT Jungle is very good in that you can see the price of a particular NFT on various marketplaces and what the floor price is, what's for sale. So as a tool for collectors, it's very easy to see and go, ooh, that is cheap and the rarity is very high, which you have on your website, which is done really well as well. So I do like that. But if you add in price there as well, that would tick that box and it'll be a very good website to use because these other websites are a little bit slower in their load speed times. And this is a lot faster at the moment. So if you implement that price into the spectrum there, I think it will do really well.
That might be the kicker. Hey,
yeah.
Actually, Sven gave me the same advice. He's like, well, he was talking about rarity first, but there's a correlation anyway between rarity and price. Yeah, I see that. I agree with you there. I was kind of concerned with trying to get everything else working well first. Yeah, and I feel like I've done that.
I think you have to.
The app is pretty solid now as a viewer, right? It does that job well. So my attention is actually starting to shift now more toward the marketplace side of things, starting with the rarity. And I'll just talk about that briefly. My computation of rarity is not the same as everyone else's. Like, everyone kind of has their own notion about how rarity should be determined. And I don't swear by mine at all. And I feel like it's just important for people to know that there are different ways to look at rarity. For example, I'll use SpaceBuds as an example. And I went into their community and got chastised a little bit by them for the rarity scores that I had put up, because they aren't consistent with the way that community thinks of rarity with respect to SpaceBuds. There is, for example, only one SpaceBud that has a unique combination of 11 different traits, and that's what makes that a particularly valuable and rare SpaceBud.
Yeah. Any
one of those traits is not rare in and of itself. Like, there are many of them that have that same trait, but only one of them has all 11. So, but that is a very project specific way of looking at rarity. I decided, at least for the time being, I'm one person here, and I realistically cannot go about trying to do this for every project in the ecosystem. So for the time being anyway, I will probably continue to do what I'm doing with rarity, which is allow it to be a purely statistically based calculation based on the rarity. It is the combined aggregate score of the rarity of each individual attribute. So, if you have a collection of 1,000 NFTs and there are, say, 10 different attributes, I look at how many of any given attribute there are. And the fewer of that attribute there are, the more rare it becomes. And I just kind of sum all of that together, and that's the rarity score that you see on CNFT.me. So, yes, I've even debated about whether it's a help or a hindrance to the site to be displaying that information at all, because it is. I know that it conflicts with other sites, the marketplaces, and the specific project sites, etc. So I'm still on the fence as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, because I don't want to create more fragmentation in the community or more sort of dispute over what constitutes rare. So it's tricky, is what I'm saying.
That is a very interesting one as well. I didn't think of that, and I didn't realize that different communities would actually consider different ways to rate their collection as being rare, what's rare, and what's not rare. So that's very interesting that you have to take that approach. And when you talk about it, and you're saying that you're taking the statistical approach around it, that kind of makes sense, because then it could be a blanket rarity score that's used across every single project. You don't have these weird caveats before one single project to calculate rarities.
Yeah, but that does, unfortunately, it allows cases like the one I described with that one very unique, rare and unique maybe need to be distinguished from each other. There's a few different ways that you can go about determining rarity, and it probably isn't enough to be looking at attributes just individually. That you have to also consider their combinations to get a more complete or accurate picture. So a combination of how rare any individual attribute is, that certainly matters. But yeah, there are other aspects to it as well. And honestly, I don't think that there's a silver bullet solution to this. I think that it require the dictation or the input from the project creators to say, this is how I want my rarity to be determined. Because behind the scenes, as they're planning their projects, they're thinking about this. They're already deciding what their most epic and rare tokens are going to be. In the same way that Alessandro published a proposal on how metadata might be structured, I think that it would be a tremendous benefit to the community and to people like myself who are building this tooling if there was a similar standard proposed for how metadata rarity was dictated. It would be better if it didn't have to be calculated at all, and instead could be dictated by the creators, that they would somehow publish this information.
Just have it in the
certainly
metadata.
The ADA Waifu's project has done this. They have a nice rarity matrix that they've made look so nice and flashy on the homepage, but it's not following any standard. It's just, here's the data. But hey, that's better than nothing. And if all the creators though were publishing their rarity information in a standardized format, that would work wonders for the community. So just a note to anyone listening, like, these are opportunities to sort of improve the overall NFT experience across the board.
Okay. I've got 2 questions that's coming out of this. So first off, with projects that are wanting to list on the website, want to appear on the website, do they have to go through a process or anything to be listed on the Explorer? Or because all that metadata is there and you're crawling it, the website's organizing it all by itself?
Unfortunately not, no. That's something else that I've kind of arrived at the conclusion, like, unless some kind of like brilliant computer science machine learning guy could come in and figure out some magical method to do it. In absence of a defined metadata structure standard, I don't see a way to programmatically determine those attributes, those aspects of the metadata that qualify as filterable attributes, because people will put their Twitter handle and their publisher name and all these other things in there that the computer would need to ignore, and limit its attention to very specific things. So the way I have the way it's working right now, you'll notice as you flip through different projects on the app, some of them include filters, some do not. The ones that do are the ones that I have gone in and manually specified what I call the schema, the filter schema. And it's a simple process for me to do. It literally takes me seconds for any given project to, all I have to do is take one look at their metadata, see how they have it organized. For example, some people will put everything under one property called attributes. And that's ideal, by the way. If I was to propose a standard, it would probably involve something like that, whereby all of the filterable attributes were at least grouped inside the metadata, therefore sort of isolated from everything else, like your website, etc. That would make the job of, then it could be automated actually, but for the time being, it's something that I've had to do manually. And this is true for all the marketplaces as well, by the way. And part of the reason that people have to pay to be featured on sites like CNFT.io or I don't think Jungle actually makes anyone pay, but I'm not exactly sure. You surely know more than I do about that. Anyway, for the time being, and probably for the rest of time, it will be there is a manual step involved in defining what attributes of the metadata or what specific properties can be filtered upon. But it's a one-time thing. It takes me only a few minutes or not even to do it. It's just I do it on basically what I'll do is I'll go onto the timeline, I'll see what's minting, and whatever's on the homepage and looks new, I'll click into it, and if it seems worthy, and I know that's like sort of a subjective, but
yeah,
i.e. if it has enough, like if there's 1,000 or more tokens, now filtration is valuable. Something that has 50 tokens, there's no point even, right?
Yeah.
You don't need filters. So if there are at least 1,000, that's when I'll consider going in and taking those couple steps to define the metadata structure, so that the application can then go in and determine, like, once the structure is declared, then my script can go in and sift through all that metadata and group it out into those neat filters that you see on the left.
Okay.
Regarding how the projects show up on my site, so far it has been purely through the help of CNFT.io, who have been in the process of, or in the business anyway, of verifying projects. They use a GitHub repository to store all of those project. It's basically an association between the project's name and one or more policy IDs. And they publish this information publicly on GitHub. So my application simply has to retrieve the latest data from that repository, that collection of projects traverse it. And what that allows is it creates a mapping between the project's name and whatever policy IDs they've used to mint tokens. And that's when you land on the verified projects page of CNFT.me, what you're seeing is the set of projects that were discovered on CNFT.io's GitHub page. Gotcha. The application supports, it can certainly do more. I just haven't found a valid source of project information outside of that one. And I think it's important to limit the view to those projects that are, quote, legit. You know, like, and I don't want to be the one to be out there scanning the Cardano space for all active projects. I'm appreciative of CNFT.io for publishing that information.
Okay, brilliant. I didn't realize that was the process behind that. So learning a little bit more about that makes it really clear. Okay, and my next question is, so you've scaled up all these servers to run the site, and you know the UX is quite good, and now you're trying to drive traffic to it and get more attention to it. But what is the revenue model on the website? How are you going to pay for these servers in a year's time when the price of it will go up? The DB Sync server is going to cost you a small fortune, and same with all the other servers. As the traffic increases, you're going to have to increase the capacity there. How are you going to pay for it?
Well, that's a fine question. To be honest, that's a problem that I when I started out on this, I mean, I was not even using servers. I was just working on my own computer. It's costing me nothing. Now that I've sort of committed to these heavier duty machines and also committed to keeping this thing alive, you know, like I don't, now that if people do start to use it, I will feel an obligation to keep this thing up. So it's an important question and one that I haven't found the right answer to yet. I was following the field of dreams business model. If you build it, they will come. And, you know, like as I recall, he lost the farm, he lost everything. Right?
Yeah,
I'm hoping that doesn't happen. And I've had some ideas though on potential ways to monetize. One of them would be to approach project creators and ask them for a contribution, for example, to have themselves featured on the homepage. There's a section of featured projects that I've just manually chosen. But for example, that would be a place that a person could pay for placement or otherwise exposure on the homepage. If CNFT.me was heavily trafficked, I think project creators would be motivated to pay some amount of money for placement, you know, so that their project could gain exposure because that's important to them. But of course, that doesn't happen until I get some traffic on the site.
Yeah.
Another concept is I've thought about possibly issuing an NFT of my own, and it would be in effect like a members token type of thing, where, you know, if you buy the CNFT token and hold that in your wallet, sort of like an ADA handle works, where if just by virtue of it being present in your wallet, that would grant your wallet some additional features, for example. So you get a more sort of enhanced or premium experience as a user of CNFT by holding that token in your wallet. And for instance, one thing you'll notice if you navigate to any particular wallet is that, and you can see this by clicking on the little eye, the information icon that appears in the header, it will say date synced, and it states a date, and it will say the next sync. And it's 1 day away, 24 hours. So there's currently, and this is a major limitation of the software, is that your own wallet will only sync once per day. So for people who don't, you know, who are not active in the space, this is fine, right? If you have a collection of tokens and every now and again you buy one more, if you have to wait a day to actually see it in your wallet, no big deal. But for people who are actively trading in the space, this is terrible. You know, there's been another member, a fairly active trader who has also been very helpful, and it's his #1 request. Now, you know, I could solve this problem just by shortening that time frame, but I see it as a potential opportunity to offer a premium feature and to, you know, get something in return for that. And so, I'm not necessarily looking to get rich here, but I do need to figure out how to cover those base costs in order to keep the thing alive. So the last option I've considered is just, asking for handouts, just drop a hat and say, hey, feel free to buy me a coffee type of thing. I don't know how effective that will be. I did fire up a Patreon page and there's a link to it there, but I have spent no time actually fleshing it out or anything like that. But, just asking for donations is a possible way to at least field the costs of operation.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't expect anyone to give me anything until they've decided that this is valuable to them. So I'm still focused on that problem, creating something of value.
Okay. And I think if you add in a couple of those features, more people will find this valuable as a valuable tool, especially when trying to search for rarities and prices and things that are being sold on the NFT marketplaces. I think that's a really key thing. The other thing that you could possibly go for is maybe even catalyst funding to give users and people in the ecosystem another option to explore their wallets and whatnot. That could be another option, another source of funding. But the NFT option is a pretty cool idea. Like CC or Eternal, as they're called now, went for the NFT collection that they put out, and that helped fund their project in general. So that's definitely another option too. Anything with a little bit of utility in there, I think people would be quite interested in. Yeah,
I hope so. And actually, I do have an interesting concept with respect to the how I would price those NFTs. I've thought about pricing them on a graduated scale, where basically, sort of like Space Buds did, where their first set were only 10 ADA, and then the second set were 20, and et cetera, all the way up to 100. Using a model similar to that, where sort of because I want to try to promote early entrants, try and get as many people in. And so I want to keep the bar as low as possible for those people who are early adopters. But as the project gains traction and demand grows for it, I can justify charging more for those tokens. And then, of course, people are free to trade them down the road if they wish.
Yeah. I did like that gradual approach of a gradual increasing of pricing that SpaceBuds did. And you don't see many projects do that lately. It's kind of a thing that got lost off, I think, in the last half of 2021. But it was a really cool idea and really cool concept because it created that sense of urgency to actually mint and go through the process before the price rised and you had to pay more for the same thing. So I did like that approach.
Well, I'm glad to hear that was favorable, and because I want to make it favorable to people. I'm definitely not trying to I'm not looking for a cash grab type of thing. I'm just trying to figure out some way to make this thing sustainable. That's because I really do enjoy the idea of giving something to the community, providing a valuable service. It's very gratifying to do that. But of course, I can't do it indefinitely without figuring out how to pay the cost. Yeah,
monetizing everything is always difficult. And come to think of it, it's people probably dropped that gradual price increase because of some projects minting out in like 15 minutes. So being able to calculate that price increase would have been quite hard, quite difficult. So some people may not have minted and left the queue, for example, and the price should have dropped back down, but obviously it didn't, or maybe it did. I don't know. So that's probably why they would have dropped that. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, perhaps. I thought that I'd solved that problem pretty elegantly, actually, when I was playing around with because yes, I mean, that is a problem of trying to kind of reserve slots, sort of like when you go to buy a ticket on Ticketmaster and you have 10 minutes to complete your transaction. I think most of the people who are minting by themselves are following a similar approach to that, where you kind of have a reserved slot where that price is held for you for some length of time. And then if you don't complete the transaction, then that slot is released. I don't know. I felt like I had it pretty well figured out where everyone would have a fair shot at getting one. But unfortunately, I've yet to put that into play. So perhaps.
I'd love to see what you do with it and see what comes about. And interesting to see how you take this project and move it forward as well. It's going to be interesting how you monetize it, how you build more value for the community, and grow the Explorer as well. So I'm interested in seeing how you take this and how you grow the project.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you. So am I, actually. I'm definitely also interested to see where it leads. I'm just I take it a day at a time. I just keep chipping away, just anytime. And feedback, by the way, I'm acting a lot on the feedback that I get from the community, because I'm one person and I'm not really a collector myself. So I'm absolutely relying on valuable feedback from people who will use the tool to tell me what they need the most. I've so far had difficulty getting answers to that question, but I think that you've answered it already quite well, which is marketplace data. That is the number one thing that the site is lacking, and that people really need and want, I think, to consider making the switch, or choosing or preferring my platform over any other.
All right. Well, good luck with it all. I'll be keeping an eye on it and tweeting out the ADA Waifus collection from it. So keep up the good work, and we'll chat again soon. And hopefully you work out how you're going to monetize the project and keep it going.
Thank you for your time, Pete. I appreciate it very much.
Now, I'll put all the links that you need to know, cnft.me, in the description down below if you aren't typing it in already to check it out. Now, there are a whole bunch of other tools in the Cardano ecosystem as well, and I'll put a couple of links down there for you so you can check them out too. I really like these things because it really helps that when you're participating in minting some of these projects, or you're looking at buying one on a secondary market, checking on these websites is a really good way to find out if you're getting something of value, if the rarity is good, if it's something that might go up later on in terms of price, so that you could flip it on the secondary market, because that's essentially what most people are doing. They're looking for those gains with these NFTs as collectors come in and collect more valuable ones, and people are flipping them along the way to make a little bit of ADA. And some of these tools are absolutely fantastic, and hopefully we'll see some more of these pricing tools within CNFT Me, so that we can actually use this one as well, because it's fast. I like how it works, and it's a really nice, sleek website. So that's it for me for this episode. I will be reviewing some more of these tools out there and showing people how to actually go through the process of finding a decent NFT, how to list them on a secondary market and flip them for a slightly higher price. Fingers crossed you flip them for a higher price. If you like this type of content, please give me that thumbs up, click subscribe, click the notification bell, and hear from me soon.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debate.